Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and I'm delighted to be welcoming someone who, before bringing him, let me read one of his posts on social media. And he visited America to attend a post graduation ceremony for his daughter. And sharing that picture, he writes reasons enough to be gratified and satisfied that it is possible to do many things at the same time. You need clarity, commitment, and inexhaustible self motivation. So that now runs in his family, and of course, his daughter, in addition to being a graduate, a postgraduate, she also ran two Boston marathons. But what he has done, we will learn about that from Ashok Lavasa ji. Ashok ji, namaste, welcome.
Namaskar. Namaskar.
Very quickly, I feel when we have someone who has served as in the election commission or with Asian Development Bank or as a senior IAS officer in several important positions, that is impressive. But I find that your other hat, which is not directly related to these positions, also is quite intriguing. It is intriguing, if I pronounce that word correctly. And I have one of your book with me right now, which is An Ordinary Life, that is Portrait of an Indian Generation. A very, very apt title. So reader is made to believe or given the suggestion that it is not just about one person, and that person happens to be your father, and you dare to refer his life as an ordinary life. He might have not liked it. I don't know. I don't know. So talk to me. We begin with this book, and then we'll go to further layers. How many years in making this book happen?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me, first of all, and greetings to all your audience. Uh, well, this book actually was written in four parts. The first part was written by my father by living the way he lived. So he did not write anything about his life. He led a life for 75 years, 76 years. And then in the last 3 years of his life, he decided to write a diary, which was both in Hindi and English, and it ran into some 40 or 50 pages, handwritten. So that was the second part. The third part was when I thought that this is like a character in search for an author. Because when you read the book, you find, and you very appropriately described it as not an individual's life, but the lives of millions of ordinary individuals uh, that represents the ethos of a generation. And I think he did represent that ethos. So the dramatic incidents that he went through in his life, which I'm sure thousands of people do, they called for somebody to write that book. So that was the third part. And that third part, incidentally, was completed in a month. I didn't take more than a month to complete the first draft of this book. And the fourth is, of course, now it is in the hands of the readers. So the readers, whenever you interact with a book, you bring your own imagination into being, and that is the fourth part of the book. Each one understands it differently.
So let's understand the top two qualities which you would say sort of sums up the principles on which your father built his life. And I have been fortunate to kind of glance some parts of the book, and if I say without knowing much of him, he was a very honest person with a sense of integrity about to wherever, whatever circumstances he was placed in, and also a conviction that what is to be done irrespective of the cost involved, which people referring that that is not practical, etc. It wasn't for him. So if I request you to share your childhood memories and see what you came to learn through his diary, and after you were a mature person, and what was left as impressions as you were growing up, was there a match or mismatch?
So excellent. I think it will take a long time for me to delve into everything that you want to know, but let me summarize it in two or three sentences. What I learned, it is my belief, and this belief I have cultivated by observing the way my parents lived, and that is that parents leave an impression on their children not because of what they say, but because of what they do. And every child is very observant, he's very sensitive, and what makes an impression on him is what he observes more than what he hears. So that was the first thing, and therefore we feel that my parents have lived their life the way they did, and that is what I have learned. So two important things, lessons that you want me to talk about. One is the belief that uh, honesty is the best policy, and that if you don't lead a life of ethics, of principles, then you are likely to go astray. You might achieve temporary satisfaction, but in the long run, you will not be better off. And when you use the word policy for honesty, it is not something that you do instinctively or emotionally or out of some misplaced conception of truth and honesty. It is a well considered, because after all, what is a policy? A policy is something that you decide to do after weighing the pros and cons of everything. So at the end of it, I think what I realize is that he lived by this belief that honesty is the best policy. You can prosper and do well in life and still follow your principles. So that is one part. And the corollary to this, Ashokji, is that for being able to do this, you need three things. One is clarity of mind, but even clarity of mind is not enough if you don't have conviction about what you want to do. But even conviction is not enough if you don't have the courage of your conviction. So, all the three things together form different strands of the ethical core. And what completes this is your mental preparedness to pay the price of what you do. So you should have the equanimity to bear the consequences of your action. And you should not have any misplaced expectation from others that what you do, what you think is right, is what you're doing, and therefore everyone will applaud it. So that is one part. And the second part, briefly, is that there are no shortcuts in life. You must uh, do mehnat and follow the due process if you want to achieve long lasting results. If you follow shortcuts, again, there might be temporary feeling of fulfillment or achievement, but that doesn't sustain through life.
Absolutely beautiful. Very well put, Ashokji. And sometimes you feel that there is so much that is coming in the form of light of knowledge from the person, and viewers would be more comfortable in appreciating where you're coming from when they learn that you have been vice president of Asian Development Bank. You have served election commissioner of as the election commissioner of India. Then, of course, before retiring as Union Finance Secretary, you served as Union Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Changes, and also Ministry of Civil Aviation. So there is rich leadership experience of 37 years that you bring with you, and yet there is no air of the kind. There's such unassuming, affectionate personality that Ashokji managed, or I shouldn't say managed, but he has it. But I think even more interesting is this other side of your personality where you articulate your thoughts, you write books, and the first one came, if I'm correct, in 2006, which was An Uncivil Servant. I will request briefly to take us there also. And I liked the title. I mean, why would you put that as uncivil servant? Very briefly, we go there because I put our conversation as a book of life. So we'll try to learn from you wherever we get. Yeah.
Well, talking about an uncivil servant, this is a story of a colleague of mine. It's not my story, who wanted to convey his story to the world, but he thought that he did not adequately possess the power of articulation. He tried doing it for probably a year. Also wrote something, and then finally, when he realized that it was difficult for him to do it, he approached me. And the reason why he approached me is very interesting. He was 10 years senior to us, and he was our deputy director in the academy. And I continued to be in touch with him even after we left the training. I used to be very fond of writing letters, and he had preserved all the letters that I wrote to him. And in fact, he told me later that uh, at the dining table, the family would sit and then read the letters that I had written. So he was appreciative of my ability to express things. And that is how he approached me. And then, of course, over 3 years, we got together to complete this book. I told him that the facts are all yours because I'm not taking responsibility for researching the veracity of what you're saying, but the way in which it should be communicated to the people will be my way. So I'm happy that that book got published. It received very good response because it was written in a very different way. And the reason why people found it different was precisely what you said, that it is a title which uh, sort of attracts and intrigues people, that what is an uncivil servant. And the reason why I called it an uncivil servant was that here was a person who rose very well and was very successful in his career. He, after putting in about 26 or 27 years of service, he resigned, and today he's a very successful business person. So he was not a stereotyped civil servant. He took his stand. He lived by his scruples in when he was in service.
So if yeah, sorry, if I take a detour and as a layman, what I understand is when you are a bureaucrat, there are multiple levels where you have your accountability or answerability or so let me bring to the equation where you are also dealing with politicians and different political parties and political leaders have their own one certain way of thinking, and then there are certain personality, then ego, everything comes into play. Uh, I believe when I read the title Uncivil Servant, I somehow get that there might be some experience of that kind also. And I think you have also been sort of at a position where you probably experienced, and one would guess that if you are serving as election commissioner, maybe there could be certain issues where you see it differently and this political leadership sees it differently, etc. So sort of take us take us through your way of perceiving and handling of this sort of equation.
So first of all, I think what you need to understand is that once you decide to join the civil services, you are part of a system. It is not as if that you are a lone ranger and you can do things the way you want. There are rules, regulations, there are laws, there are hierarchies, and you have to fit within that. And more than that, there is an entire government that you represent. Government has its own policies, and in a democratic form of governance, it is the elected representatives who are responsible for framing public policies. You are there to aid and assist them, advise them, and execute the programs which are for public welfare. So I think one important thing is to realize what is your role in that system. More often than not, people, I think, mistake their role. It's like, in a play there is a main character and there is a character artist and there is someone else, and everyone has his own part. No one's part can be deemed to be more important than another person's part, and that's not the way you should perceive your role as also. But you have to understand what is your role, what are the limits of your role, and you have to perform your role accordingly. That is one. The second is that because there are different organs of the state, whether it is judiciary or executive or media or elected representatives, there is a certain tension which prevails. And that tension is in the positive sense, it's not in the negative sense. Because each one of them could have their own priorities. Now, how do you achieve that balance is important because democratic governance and working for the larger interests of public is all about resolving conflicting interests. Everyone will have their own interests, and everybody has a right to think that their interest is the paramount interest. But those who are in charge of governance, it is their job to work out via medias in society and move forward. In that process, it is possible that sometimes there are conflicts. Your perception may not match the perception of an elected representatives. So I think what I have felt is that a civil servant, for example, he should have the clarity of and courage to render honest advice. At the same time, he should have the humility to work in the larger public interest and not think that his point of view is the only correct point of view. Because someone else in another role, he may have a larger constituency to serve, and therefore he's taking the decision that he does. So I think a proper understanding of your circumstances, your role, can avoid many of these conflicting or so-called contradictory situations. But
Yeah,
uh,
Ashok, if in a lighter vein, if I take the liberty of also mentioning that you, before joining administrative services, served as lecturer. So there is a teacher in you, and an interviewer in me tries to interrupt now and then because that is how it works out. And so I wanted to also mention that you are experienced international negotiator. You also led Indian team during the Paris Agreement on climate change that was December 2015, besides the Montreal Protocol. These are the issues, but as a layman, many of us do not understand the intricacies of it. But what we see is when we go to a place which used to be or is naturally beautiful, and you are a widely traveled person, you have seen nooks and corners of India. How do you see in terms of taking care of protecting our environment we are doing, and whether these international agreements has any sort of significant impact?
I think, first of all, in order to understand the concept of climate change, for example, it became public knowledge or it came into circulation in public debate because of certain research which was done by people. One is the empirical evidence that you feel, which everyone can feel. For example, people living in the coast or people living in the mountains of India, they would experience the change that is taking place, and they can feel the adverse consequences of that. But they may not be in a position to articulate it as a global phenomenon. That articulation has been done by researchers over a long period of time, and the effort in the climate change negotiations through UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, was to arrive at a consensus that the world should agree that there is a problem.
Hmm.
Till you agree that there is a problem, you can't find solutions. The second step is, what are the solutions? Who is in a better position to implement those solutions? What are the resources required to implement those solutions? That is where the conflict between developing countries or the least developed countries and developed countries emerges, which is what Paris Climate Change Agreement was all about. It was an effort to identify the people, the action that is required to be taken by all countries. It was an effort to maintain the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. Because the problem of climate change, in effect, is actually the consequences of the path of development or the quality of economic development which was pursued in the past over 200 years. Because of the technologies that were used or because of the way natural resources were exploited, it has led to certain consequences which the world is facing. Now, the conflict is that there are many thousands or millions of people, billions of people who also want to grow the way the developed world has grown. And we are telling them that if you follow the path that the developed world followed, you will enhance or aggravate the consequences. So, what is the different way of doing the same thing? Because the objective is human development, economic growth. So, I think how different technologies can be evolved, can be adapted for the growth of the people who are still in that race. That is one. At the same time, while we are discovering new technologies and finding the finances to adopt those technologies, how can we adapt ourselves to this phenomena of climate change? How can we change our behavior? How can we lead a life of moderation?
So sorry, looking at the paucity of time, if I request you to share the level of your satisfaction in terms of the direction in which we are proceeding, especially focusing on India, in terms of paying attention to protecting the pristine beauty of nature.
So, as far as India is concerned, there are two ways of assessing it. One assessment is in relation to the commitments which India has made as a part of the nationally determined contributions. They are called NDCs. Every country, all the 197 countries who are signatories, they have submitted nationally determined contributions. So India has the satisfaction of saying that we have already achieved substantially the NDCs which we had submitted, which we were to achieve by 2030. So, in terms of, say, the renewable energy target, the non-fossil fuel-based electricity generation capacity, which we were to create, we had made a commitment that 40% of India's electricity generation will come from non-fossil fuel base. By 2030, we have already exceeded that. Now we have increased it to 50%. That is one. Similarly, the emission intensity of our growth, India had committed that we'll reduce it by 35% with a benchmark year of 2005. We have achieved that. Now we have enhanced that target from 35% to 40%. So I think there is satisfaction on that level. But is that enough? I think it is not enough. So we need to accelerate because the pace of our economic growth is also accelerating. So new technologies have to be adopted. India has already become the fourth largest producer of renewable energy in the world, both solar and wind. So that will have to be accelerated further. The retirement of old coal-based power plants, which have a lot of CO2 emissions, that will have to be accelerated. There are many other actions that need to be taken by tightening the environment regulations. But more important than any of these things, and this not only applies to India, it applies to the world, you have to reduce what are known as lifestyle emissions, not livelihood emissions. And that
Yeah,
is
yeah, I hear you, and I think that's a big challenge which the whole world faces. India also, with its growing demand for the technological gadgets, which then that they don't get dissolved, etc. Plastic, how use of plastic, etc. But now switching gears again, and we are just talking to a broad sort of canvas about book of life, and I'll repeat for our viewers, Ashok Lavasa ji. He has written a couple of books, I would say. This one, An Ordinary Life, we'll go back to this as we conclude. I'll also quickly mention you with your wife came up with this wonderful treasure, Echoes of Faith, and in addition to An Uncivil Servant. And from your book of your preface, I'll read two lines and then I'll have a question that would be probably the concluding question. You said, referring to your father, you said, happiness is not a goal for them, it is their attainment. They have attained a balance between Shahi, having the resources to fulfill one's desires, and Fakiri, the ability to rise above the trap of such desires. I think this is profound, and this must have been your constant conscious or unconscious companion as you walked through various experiences in your life. And before I hand it over to you, I'll also read the concluding doha of Kabir that you have in your book, which is Kabira Khada Bazaar mein मांगे सबकी खैर ना काहू से दोस्ती ना काहू से बैर. This takes me also to the samatva that we hear in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So uh, essence of your process of coming out unscathed from certain experiences which may result into addition of toxic substance in some people. I think you have managed to develop that filter or that mechanism which helps you in staying fresh and available for embracing life. Your parting remarks on this, sir.
Uh, I think what I would attribute it to is my study of literature, which has made me more humane. It has made me believe that you should be able to understand the other point of view, however strongly you feel about your own. So that gives you some kind of balance in life. The third is that you should have a sense of humor. And that sense of humor means don't take yourself very seriously, take your work seriously. And when you take your work seriously, it means that you are totally professional about your work. Bring into the performance all the competence that you have, all the intelligence and knowledge which is required. Don't think that you have the answer to all the problems. Learn to collaborate with people, talk to people who know more about things than what you do. Then you will be able to understand and enrich your decision because it has inputs from so many places.
So
And
concluding, yeah, sorry, the concluding, yeah, sir, concluding question with quick request. You may continue where you left off if needed. So share or recommend two books that are your personal favorites, as well as if there are two persons that you were to refer who inspired you or yeah.
so what I was saying as my last observation was that you cannot take credit for whatever success you have achieved. You should never think that you are responsible for your success. There are other forces. You may not call it God or anything else, but there are forces which are beyond your control and your comprehension, which contribute to whatever happens. And therefore, there is that element of reliance on, not over reliance on yourself, which I think is important and which helps you in negotiating the difficult paths of life. As far as books are concerned, I would not be in a position to make a specific recommendation. There are many, many books which are so good. But as far as authors are concerned, I have always held that there are three persons who have had deep impression on me. One is William Shakespeare, the second is Mirza Ghalib, and the third is Kabir. I think all the three of them, they reflect such a profound understanding of the complexities of life, of the mysteries of life. And in fact, if you remember that famous quote from Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Beautiful. So I think we'll have opportunity of talking to you about these three separately, hopefully, sometime on Kabir, and especially on Kabir. I think, I am delighted to have this opportunity of interacting with Ashok Lavasa ji on Book of Life, and I am enriched, and I am sure many of our viewers would also agree that is the way they felt. So, with lots and lots of good wishes, sir. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for this opportunity.
So thanking him and thanking all of you for
All
being with us. This is Ashok. Namaste.